Good afternoon and happy Britney Day to all who celebrate. Today we're going to be talking about her new tell-all story, The Woman in Me. I listened to all 5.5 hours of the audiobook of The Woman in Me today at work. If you're curious, it is not narrated by Britney, it is narrated by actress Michelle Williams, which is definitely an interesting experience. And basically for the format of this video, it's pretty straightforward. I will summarize the entire book from beginning to end for those who are curious, and then at the end I'll give my thoughts. As an amateur Britney Spears historian myself, there has been a lot of buzz about this book. If you're out of the loop, Britney spent 13 years of her life in what's called a conservatorship, which is a legal agreement that allowed her father to make virtually all of her decisions for her. Then, after a lengthy legal battle and a flood of online support known as the Free Britney movement, she was able to get that agreement terminated and speak freely about the details of her life and career and the abuse she endured under her handlers. I did a similar video for Jeanette McCurdy's book I'm Glad My Mom Died when that came out a while back, but I will give a preemptive warning that we'll be discussing spoilers for the entire book, and I'll also give a trigger warning for parental abuse, pregnancy loss, mental health, and body image. I guess the other big flag I'll throw out there is that this is clearly a ghost-written book. That's pretty common for this tell-all style story, but it was a really interesting read or listen, and I feel like you could definitely still feel Britney's voice and feelings come across. This book is pretty much told in the chronological order of Britney's life. We start out in a scene of Britney's childhood home growing up in Louisiana, her tumultuous relationship with her parents who fought all the time in part due to her father's severe alcoholism. The most interesting part of this section for me was learning about the generational trauma in Britney's family, which I didn't know about. Her grandfather was pretty abusive to her father Jamie, and that's what created his strained relationship with his own children, Britney, Brian, and Jamie Lynn. From there we learn about Britney's affinity for singing and dancing at a young age, how she got her big break on the Mickey Mouse Club, which was an experience she looks back on rather fondly. We then learned a little bit about her life in the theater and her first recording sessions and music videos.
Oh my goodness, hello. Ew, strong Britney. Yeah, it was a weird time. Ew, I'm embarrassed, can we stop?
Then we get into one of the most interesting sections of the book for me, and this is the topic that has gotten the most media buzz since sections of it have become public online. Obviously, Britney and Justin Timberlake were the celebrity couple back in the day, but it was really interesting to learn how that relationship affected Britney so deeply and set a lot of other events during her life into motion. Britney really loved Justin, so much so that she looked past a lot of the, unsavory things that young men in Hollywood tended to do when they were off on their own touring the world. In fact, she loved him so much that when she got pregnant with his baby, Justin allegedly pressured her to get an abortion because they didn't want anyone to know she did the procedure at home, which was a traumatic and painful experience. We also learned a little bit about how she felt during the breakup and the fact that the media painted her as this harlot that broke Justin's heart when that wasn't necessarily the case. She expressed that she didn't necessarily care that Justin had broken the perception that she was this innocent virgin, which she never really liked in the first place, but she didn't feel great about the fact that everyone was so turned against her after all she and Justin had been through together behind the scenes, and the fact that she truly did love him. From there, Britney takes us through a lot of moments that we've already come to know: the Diane Sawyer interview, the Madonna kiss, the Vegas wedding that her parents were really unhappy about, and even some stuff that we didn't know about, like her 2-week fling with Colin Farrell and the fact that she was offered a role in Chicago, and she regretted turning it down. At some point during this section, she also goes home to spend time in Louisiana, and she calls her little sister Jamie Lynn a complete and total bitch and describes how badly she treated their mother, which was just funny to hear about in Britney's own words. Then we get into the pregnancy saga. Basically, Britney meets and marries Kevin Federline. She's looking to settle down and start a family, and pregnancy hormones start to make her a little crazy and overprotective. She recalls how she went to the set of Zoe 101 and screamed at a young actress, which we now know is Alexa Nicholas, because Jamie Lynn said some bullshit lies about her. She also talks about what it was like to be pregnant for basically 2 years straight and what happened once the children were actually born. Basically, her life became a whirlwind where she felt like she had no power due to the paparazzi and the media constantly claiming that she was unfit to be a mother. Of course, there's the famous image of her son in her lap, the green umbrella, and the infamous head shaving, which she did as a clear act of rebellion from the fact that she felt like she was losing control in her personal life. At the same time that all of this was going on, she was going through a custody battle with Kevin Federline, who was absent during a lot of their initial years with the children due to his attempts to become a rap star. Still, because of the narratives about Britney in the tabloids, kids, Kevin won custody of the boys, and it became more difficult for Britney to be able to see them. She ended up going to rehab to be able to see them more often, and everything changed the night that the police had to forcibly take one of her babies away from her when Kevin came to pick them up from a visit. Basically, she was unsure if she would ever see her kids again, and that was the moment that springboarded the next 13 years of her life in a conservatorship. The conservatorship was the brainchild of Britney's father Jamie and a woman named Lou Taylor who owned an entertainment company. I won't get into all the details about the complex legality of it, but basically the court appointed Jamie as Britney's conservator and he gained control of pretty much every aspect of her life. He controlled what she did every day, he monitored her cell phone and who she dated, and even would restrict her calorie intake while constantly telling her that she was too fat. She managed to garner a relationship with a partner at one point who she wanted to have a baby with, and that's when her father made it clear that she was not allowed to have another baby, going as far as to refuse a doctor's appointment to help Britney remove her own IUD. And while all of these stringent rules were placed upon Britney during her conservatorship, it became clear that while the court deemed her too sick to make any of her own personal decisions, she was perfectly healthy enough to tour the world, do TV spots, and even become a judge on The X Factor. The reason why she went along with all of this, according to her, was that she really wanted to see her boys, and this was the most effective way to do that. But even that was proving to be difficult because while she was begging for her time off in between tours, her father and her team were pushing new tours and residencies onto her, and this is where she decided to start rebelling a little bit. Most notably, there was this infamous clip where she was supposed to announce her new Las Vegas residency, and then she walks off and just doesn't perform. Even when she tried to control some small aspects of this new life, as little as changing up her show or adding new songs to the routine, the answer was always no. Britney goes into how she thinks that this was a power move on her father's part because if Britney was cognitive and capable enough to control her own show, then that would prove that she didn't need her dad to rule her life the way he had been. Eventually, these small acts of rebellion got to be too much, and she was basically forced into a mental facility for treatment after her father called a doctor to come to her home and evaluate her. This was sort of the breaking point for Britney and everyone involved here. She was locked away in this sterile sort of environment, was not able to do anything she wanted or liked, and once she was able to finally come home, her family came to visit her and basically acted like they hadn't just locked her away for months. Jamie Lynn was also proposing like a sister sitcom and a talk show, and she was just not into any of it because none of them had acknowledged the trauma that they just inflicted upon her. Meanwhile, people online are taking notice that Britney had spent all this time locked away, that she was actively being silenced by the people around her, and this became known as the Free Britney movement. This was probably one of the most interesting parts of the book for me, hearing her talk about her perception of it, because we didn't really know at the time. She said she was super grateful to all the people who were speaking up for her and supporting her, taking notice of her absence, and that was really cool to hear because Free Britney was such an interesting movement for me to witness and follow in real time. I actually did a paper and presentation on it in grad school, fun fact. She also talked about how annoyed she was about all the documentaries that came out about her and the Free Britney movement around this time, which definitely makes sense. She was mostly pissed that people she knew and trusted at one point had gone on all these shoots to talk and tell all these interviews where she couldn't speak at all, and yeah, going back on a lot of those Free Britney documentary pieces, like the Hulu one in particular, it probably does feel like there's a huge missing piece of the puzzle there. Eventually, we learn about how she gained the strength to ask for the end of the conservatorship and the research and fighting she had to do to end her relationship with the court-appointed lawyer she had for all of this time, and she got a new lawyer named Matthew Rosengart, and Rosengart ultimately got her father Jamie removed as the conservator in the legal agreement and eventually terminated the conservatorship altogether. Then the last chapters of the book are sort of an epilogue where she, gives insight on what happened after, she talks about recording songs in the studio, talks about her positive friendship with Elton John. She also reflects a little bit on her relationship with the people in her life who harmed her, and I just need to read a passage that she wrote about Jamie Lynn because either her or her ghostwriter truly did pop off here. Jamie Lynn clearly suffered in our family home too. She grew up a child of divorce, which I did not. It seems that she didn't get a lot of parenting, and I know it was hard to try to sing and act and make her own way in the world in the shadow of a sibling who got not only most of the family's attention, but a lot of the world's. My heart goes out to her for all those reasons. Drag her. She also talks about getting to do all of the things she missed out on, like being able to travel to places like Maui and Cancun, and she even gives a shout out to the gay community, adding that she had a special relationship with her queer fans in particular, and she even talked about a drag performance she saw of some of her songs and how much she loved it, and because that's sort of in my world and my orbit, I really loved hearing that. It made me smile. Finally, she talks about her pregnancy and miscarriage that she had a little while ago, and how although it was traumatic, she seems to be pretty at peace with it while she's healing, and she ends the book talking about what freedom means to her. For example, like I said, I've been following this case kinda since the beginning. I know quite a bit about it, so there was a lot of stuff that I knew in this book. A lot of it wasn't a shocking revelation to me. If you followed the case, you've probably heard some of it before. But I think the most interesting thing to me and what made it a good read was hearing Britney's inner monologue and feeling about a lot of these monumental pop culture events, because a lot of the time, even though a lot of these events were about her, we were never really getting her side of the story. She was never part of that dialogue. And I think especially now that she's out of the conservatorship, people like to paint Britney as this mentally ill, unself-aware woman who's like in her kitchen naked playing with knives, right? People often use that as a justification for the fact that the conservatorship never should have ended. But something that really struck me about this book was that she seems pretty self-aware about the choices that she's made, the mistakes that have happened in her life, and the way that she had to get out of that situation. You know, obviously we're hearing it from one perspective, so maybe it's not entirely the truth. I don't know Britney Spears personally, but it seems like in a lot of ways she's ready to take accountability for the choices that she made that were wrong, but she's also acknowledging that a lot of the choices that she made throughout her life and career and stardom was because of people who were actively abusing and harming her. And she shows a lot of grace to them, way more than I personally would, I think. Ultimately, this book is just kind of an expansion pack upon what we already knew. This woman has been done dirty in every conceivable way since she started her career in the 90s, largely due to misogyny, obviously. And the fact that she's still standing after the amount of people who wronged her and hurt her is quite admirable. She strikes me as a woman who is spiritual, flawed, but is self-aware of it, and loves her children. This woman loves her kids, and I know she had quite a few struggles with like miscarrying and fertility and the whole abortion story with Justin Timberlake, and I hope after all that she can ultimately find peace, because she most definitely deserves it. So yeah, pick this one up. I think you'll like it if you are not familiar with the Britney case, because you'll learn a lot of things that you might not necessarily know. And even if you do know a lot about the Free Britney movement and the Britney case, I think you'll appreciate hearing her side of the story in her own words. Thanks so much, you guys, and I'll see you next time.